Fokus Perempuan Politik Indonesia 2021. Dan forum ini menarik sekali karena akan menghadirkan para pembicara dari beberapa negara, jadi bukan hanya dari Indonesia. Merupakan kehormatan tersendiri bagi saya, Sandrina Malacchiano, untuk bisa memandu forum atau sesi ini. Saya ucapkan terima kasih banyak kepada KPPI yang sudah kembali memberikan kesempatan kepada saya. Kegiatan Rakernas ini diharapkan juga bisa memberikan masukan dan rekomendasi kepada para pengambil kebijakan, yaitu DPR dan pemerintah, untuk memperkuat kebijakan afirmasi keterwakilan perempuan di parlemen. Dan tema yang diangkat adalah dalam sesi ini, peran kontributif perempuan dalam membangun demokrasi. Nah, sebelum berbicara lebih banyak tentang forum ini, saya akan mempersembahkan atau mempersilahkan waktu kepada Mbak Sekar, karena ada beberapa pembicara yang nanti akan mempresentasikan materi dalam bahasa Inggris. Untuk itu perlu ada sedikit penjelasan mengenai fitur penterjemah. Saya persilahkan Mbak Sekar.
Ya, terima kasih Mbak Sandrina. Selamat siang Bapak Ibu sekalian. Sekedar untuk menginformasikan bahwa pertemuan hari ini akan digunakan fitur penerjemahan karena beberapa speaker akan berasal dari beberapa negara begitu. Kepada peserta Zoom meeting, kepada peserta Zoom meeting yang menghadiri online, untuk mengaktifkan Zoom fitur penerjemahan di Zoom, bisa menggunakan laptop atau menggunakan handphone. Begitu. Untuk yang menggunakan laptop, langkah pertamanya di bawah fitur penerjemahan dapat ditemukan melalui klik tanda interpretation di bawah pada pengguna Zoom laptop. Itu ada di sini Ibu, di sebelahnya reaction. Untuk langkah kedua, Ibu Bapak sekalian dapat menerjemahkan dari bahasa Inggris ke bahasa Indonesia dengan mengklik tanda Japanese. Jadi kalau interpretation yang tanda dunia bulat itu sudah diklik tanda Japanese, itu akan langsung membawa kita ke channel bahasa Indonesia. Untuk menghilangkan suara latar asli, Bapak Ibu sekalian bisa memute original audio sehingga tidak terganggu dengan suara latar aslinya. Untuk langkah ketiga, kalau Bapak Ibu ingin kembali mendengarkan dari original audio, silahkan menonaktifkan dengan mengklik off icon interpretation. Kemudian untuk pengguna Zoom melalui ponsel, Bapak Ibu sekalian dapat mengaktifkannya dengan mengklik tanda more dalam Zoom ponsel. Itu di bawah di bagian titik 3 itu ada more. Kemudian Bapak Ibu sekalian klik language interpretation pada baris ketiga. Untuk langkah keduanya, Bapak Ibu sekalian dapat menerjemahkan bahasa Inggris ke bahasa Indonesia dengan mengklik tanda Japanese. Ini masih Portugis, Japanese. Kemudian nanti Bapak Ibu sekalian akan masuk ke dalam channel bahasa Indonesia, begitu. Untuk memute original audio, silahkan menggunakan mute original audio agar menghilangkan latar suara asli dan tidak terganggu dengan suara aslinya. Lalu klik done setelah selesai di kanan atas. Langkah ketiganya, untuk kembali ke bahasa Indonesia, silakan Bapak Ibu mengulangi proses tersebut dan juga kembali ke language interpretation, klik original audio di icon interpretation, kemudian klik done. Untuk Bapak Ibu yang hadir secara offline di ruang meeting dan ingin mendengarkan sesi dalam bahasa Inggris atau nanti pada saat pembicara bahasa Inggris ingin mendengarkan sesi bahasa Indonesia dan akan mengakses lewat interpretasi di Zoom, silahkan nanti menggunakan headset dan jangan lupa memute Zoom-nya karena nanti kalau tidak di-mute akan feedback. Begitu dari saya. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih banyak Mbak Sekar, dan perlu kami informasikan juga bahwa seluruh peserta yang berada di dalam ruangan ini juga hadir dengan membawa hasil negatif swab antigen. Jadi sudah sesuai dengan protokol kesehatan untuk memastikan bahwa kita saling jaga, saling melindungi satu sama lain, termasuk saya juga sudah melakukan swab antigen sebelum menuju ke sini dengan hasil yang alhamdulillah negatif. Baik, saya rasa untuk memulai forum ini, sepantasnya waktu dan kesempatan saya persilahkan atau saya persembahkan kepada Ketua Umum KPPI, Mbak Dwi Septiawati Jafar, untuk memberikan sambutan pembuka dulu. Mbak Septi silahkan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Om Swastiastu. Segala puji bagi Allah, Tuhan yang Maha Kuasa. Salam dan sholawat pada Muhammad Rasulullah SAW. Teriring doa untuk Bapak Ibu semua, baik yang hadir secara offline di ruangan ini maupun yang hadir secara virtual. Mudah-mudahan selalu sehat dan tetap optimis dalam menjalani kehidupan. Yang saya hormati Ibu Lena Mariana Mukti, Dewan Pakar DPP KPPI yang sudah bersedia hadir. Yang saya hormati Mas Agus dari WD Indonesia yang telah memberikan dukungan pada kegiatan Rakernas KPPI ini. Yang saya hormati dan banggakan teman-teman dari DPD KPPI seluruh Indonesia, hadir hari ini 26 DPD KPPI seluruh Indonesia. Kita kasih aplaus dulu kayaknya ya. Meskipun kelihatannya sedikit ya, tapi sudah mencerminkan seluruh Indonesia hadir di sini. Kemudian juga yang saya hormati dan banggakan teman-teman dari pengurus DPP KPPI yang telah melaksanakan dan menyelenggarakan kegiatan ini dengan baik, dan tentu saja Mbak Sandrina ya sebagai moderator kita. Saya ingin menyapa dan memberikan rasa apresiasi kepada para pembicara yang juga sudah hadir. Yang pertama adalah yang saya banggakan dan hormati Ibu Ade Yasin, Bupati dari Kabupaten Bogor. Ini adalah luar biasa ya, perempuan eksekutif kita di Kabupaten Bogor, Bupati yang kita berharap nanti beliau bisa bercerita tentang bagaimana perempuan eksekutif bisa membangun atau menghadirkan kebijakan-kebijakan publik yang ramah perempuan, anak dan keluarga yang bisa memberikan penyelesaian isu-isu terkait ya perempuan, anak dalam secara signifikan, terutama di wilayah beliau. Assalamualaikum, Teh Ade, sudah hadirkah di virtual? Iya, alhamdulillah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Iya, terima kasih ya, Teh Ade sudah hadir membersamai kami di tengah kunjungan kerja beliau di luar kota ya. Kemudian juga hadir Ibu Elfina S. Caravalo dari Timor Leste. Halo, Mrs. Elfina Caravalo. Thanks very much for joining our meeting today. Kemudian ada Mrs. Rona Ancaritos dari Philippines. Kemudian Miss Sofia Fernandez dan Waseka Ayesa. Jadi pada hari ini kita sengaja menghadirkan perempuan-perempuan pemimpin dari mancanegara. Hari ini hadir dari Bangladesh, Filipina, Timor Leste, kemudian juga Indonesia dan dari Inggris ya. Kita ingin mendengarkan pengalaman mereka sebagai perempuan-perempuan leader di mancanegara dalam beberapa isu yang penting. Yang pertama adalah terkait bagaimana mendorong keterwakilan perempuan di negara mereka. Ya, kemudian juga kita ingin juga mendengar bagaimana masyarakat sipil terlibat dalam membangun demokrasi di negara tersebut, ya. Sehingga kita sebagai perempuan politik juga bisa belajar dari pengalaman-pengalaman mereka. Kita juga ingin mendengar ya bagaimana perempuan politik ya di Inggris ya nanti akan mempresentasikan hasil penelitian tentang perempuan-perempuan leader ya di beberapa negara. Ini tentu terkait dengan upaya Kaukus Perempuan Politik Indonesia menghadirkan KPPI sebagai pelopor gerakan perempuan politik yang berkontribusi dalam pemenuhan, pemajuan, dan perlindungan hak-hak politik perempuan untuk Indonesia yang adil, sejahtera, dan bermartabat. Tentu saja kalau kita berbicara tentang Indonesia adil, sejahtera, dan bermartabat, kita menginginkan indeks demokrasi yang bagus, indeks demokrasi yang tinggi, kemudian juga indeks pembangunan manusia yang tinggi. Dan ini tentu saja membutuhkan peran kontributif dari perempuan. Sebagai entitas dengan jumlah 50% kurang atau 50% lebih dari seluruh populasi dunia, seluruh populasi Indonesia, tentu sangat tidak mungkin jika tidak terlibat dalam proses pengambilan keputusan. Nah, oleh karena itu pada acara Women's Leaders Talk pada siang hari ini, pengalaman-pengalaman yang nanti akan dibagi, yang akan diceritakan oleh teman-teman dari luar negeri bisa menjadi satu inspirasi bagi perempuan-perempuan politik Indonesia untuk terus meningkatkan kontribusinya pada negeri. Karena kita ingin perempuan politik terus berkontribusi tanpa henti bagi negeri. Demikian yang bisa saya sampaikan. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih banyak Mbak Septi. Baik, mohon tepuk tangannya dulu untuk Mbak Septi. Luar biasa bisa menyelenggarakan forum seperti ini yang isinya juga sangat kaya dan saya yakin akan sangat bermanfaat untuk memajukan peran perempuan dalam pembentukan demokrasi, bukan hanya di Indonesia tapi insya Allah untuk banyak negara lain. Semakin banyak ada perempuan yang menjadi pemimpin. Dan seperti tadi disampaikan, tujuan dari forum ini adalah untuk mendengarkan kisah sukses dan pengalaman perempuan dalam membangun demokrasi, lalu menyampaikan kontribusi perempuan di masing-masing negara. Jadi mereka akan menyampaikan cerita mereka bagaimana mendorong representasi perempuan, pendidikan politik, pencegahan korupsi, regulasi isu perempuan, anak dan keluarga, termasuk juga bicara soal lingkungan hijau, pembangunan ekonomi, dan banyak isu strategis lainnya. Acara ini karena ada banyak pembicara yang dari luar negeri akan dilakukan dalam dua bahasa, bilingual. So allow me to first of all welcome all our respectable speakers from abroad. It's a great honor to have you with us in this forum. So as have been introduced by Ibu Septi earlier, we know that we have speakers from the United Kingdom, from Timor-Leste, from the Philippines, and from Bangladesh. A great honor and utmost pleasure to have you with us. I am Sandrina Malacchiano. I'm really grateful to be part of this forum. I'm part of MPI, Maju Perempuan Indonesia. It's in English, Indonesian Progressive Women. So we always work hand in hand with KPPI. So before we continue with speakers from abroad, we already have one speaker. Ada pembicara pertama kita dari dalam negeri. Tadi sudah disampaikan ada Ibu Bupati Bogor, Ibu Hajah Ade Munawaroh Yasin, SHMH. Bu Ade Yasin adalah politikus Indonesia yang menjabat sebagai Bupati Bogor sejak Desember 2018. Pernah menjabat sebagai anggota DPRD Kabupaten Bogor dari fraksi P3, menjabat dari 2014 hingga 2018. dan pada pemilihan kepala daerah di Kabupaten Bogor 2018 lalu. Bu Ade Yasin mencalonkan diri didampingi calon wakil Bupati Iwan Setiawan, didukung 3 partai politik, P3, PKB, dan Gerindra, dapat nomor urut 2 dan berhasil mengalahkan 4 pasang calon lainnya. Nah, luar biasa ini. Saya sangat senang Teh Ade bisa bergabung bersama kami. Terima kasih di tengah kesibukan yang sangat padat. Kami ingin mendengarkan kisah, mungkin bisa berbagi juga cerita dan memberikan masukan kepada forum ini. Semua pembicara mendapat alokasi waktu sekitar 20 menit. Jadi saya persilahkan Teh Ade untuk segera memulai. Nanti mudah-mudahan bisa terus bersama kami hingga akhir acara untuk menerima pertanyaan dari peserta forum. Baik, silahkan Teh Ade.
Ya, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang Ibu Ketua KPPI, Ibu Septi, dan terima kasih untuk Mbak Sandrina Malacchiano. Saya juga menyapa ibu-ibu yang hadir di lokasi. Ada sahabat saya, Ibu Lena Mukti. Terima kasih siang ini memberikan kesempatan kepada saya untuk ikut memberikan pengalaman atau barangkali apa yang pernah kita lakukan sebagai perempuan. Tapi mohon maaf Mbak, karena saya sedang tugas di luar kota, saya lagi di Cirebon, kebetulan nanti jam 2 kurang seperempat itu seharusnya jam 1 ya, tapi tadi saya meminta dimundurkan karena saya ada acara webinar ini. Jadi kemungkinan saya tidak akan itu sampai habis karena khawatir yang nunggu nanti pada pulang gitu ya. Terima kasih. Jadi bahan yang diberikan kepada saya yaitu tentang kebijakan publik ramah perempuan dan lingkungan hidup. Studi kasus di PMK Bogor. Nah, pada saat saya terjun di eksekutif sebagai Bupati Bogor yang jumlah penduduknya terbesar di Indonesia, yaitu 6 juta orang. Jadi dibayangkan kalau dibandingkan dengan provinsi di Sumatera Barat saja lebih banyak di Kabupaten Bogor. Kalau provinsi di Sumatera Barat contohnya diurus oleh 16 bupati dan 3 wali kota, jumlah penduduk 5,5 juta jiwa. Saya 6 juta jiwa di sini diurus oleh 1 bupati. Mudah-mudahan rencana ataupun usulan pemekaran di Kabupaten Bogor bisa disetujui karena sangat terlalu besar dan pelayanan juga tentunya harus terjangkau semua dengan jarak yang cukup luas dan lama ya dalam perjalanan, bisa dari ujung Bogor ke ujung timur ke barat itu bisa 5 jam perjalanan, sehingga ini lebih baik kita untuk dimekarkan menjadi 2 atau 3 kabupaten atau kota. Mudah-mudahan ini adalah upaya, tapi kalaupun belum ya tidak apa, ini harus saya syukuri sebagai tugas dari masyarakat untuk memimpin Kabupaten Bogor. Dan selama pandemi ini tentunya tugas bupati wali kota dimanapun pasti terasa berat karena kita harus berperang melawan pandemi, tetapi juga program dan upaya untuk mensejahterakan masyarakat juga tidak boleh lepas dari tanggung jawab kita, sehingga ya harus kita betul-betul menyesuaikan waktu dan pikiran kita untuk masyarakat. Semoga doa kita sama, pandemi ini segera berakhir dan diangkat dari muka bumi ini. Baik Ibu yang saya hormati, sesungguhnya di dalam penyelenggaraan daerah di Kabupaten Bogor, saya sebagai perempuan tentunya harus lebih ramah ya terhadap perempuan. Jadi artinya dominasi di Kabupaten Bogor, walaupun perempuan laki-laki lebih banyak, tapi tidak harus mendominasi. Tidak harus mendominasi bahwa dunia baik itu di pekerjaan atau di jabatan-jabatan pemerintahan dan lain-lain tidak harus semuanya dikuasai oleh laki-laki. Tetapi kesempatan perempuan ini juga tidak langsung dipegang atau tidak ada hadiah atau given ya untuk jabatan atau untuk menjadi tokoh-tokoh di lembaga-lembaga dan sebagainya. Tetapi ini tetap harus direbut karena kita ingin membuktikan bahwa perempuan itu mampu berada di segala bidang ya. Jadi kalaupun misalkan ada 2 orang terbaik ya, laki-laki dan perempuan, tetapi ketika nilainya lebih besar laki-laki ya dengan terpaksa kita berikan. Tetapi ketika ada 2 orang laki-laki dan perempuan, nilainya lebih besar perempuan, walaupun berat secara fisik, harus dilakukan. Tetapi ketika bagus ya tetap harus diberikan kepada perempuan, walaupun jenis pekerjaannya sebetulnya domainnya laki-laki begitu. Jadi ini lebih kepada prestasi. Alhamdulillah di Kabupaten Bogor ini saya memberikan kesempatan dari mulai kepala desa, camat, kepala dinas, banyak juga kepala dinas perempuan yang dijabat, bahkan periode yang lalu itu perempuan kepala Bapeda. Jadi yang mengurus dapurnya Bogor itu adalah perempuan. Dan dua direktur rumah sakit juga perempuan. Dan ada beberapa jabatan-jabatan strategis yang dijabat oleh perempuan. Tetapi itu bukan hadiah karena dia perempuan, tetapi perempuan ini juga bertarung. Ya artinya ikut tes, ikut open bidding, ikut seleksi dan lain-lain. Sehingga proses normatif itu tetap jalan, tetapi memang ketika baik, dia tidak ada lagi pertimbangan, oh ini karena perempuan mungkin nggak bisa, tidak ada begitu. Ketika dia yang memang yang terbaik ya dia harus lolos dan harus ditempatkan di tempat yang memang diinginkan begitu. Jadi kuncinya adalah kesempatan itu harus direbut, jangan menunggu diberi. Jadi jangan kita juga mengharapkan bahwa mungkin karena perempuan harus dikasihani, mungkin ini tidak, tetapi tetap bikin perempuan juga harus bisa bertarung dan bersaing dengan laki-laki. Karena memang sudah zamannya udah harus begitu. Nah, dalam kebijakan perempuan atau kebijakan publik perempuan di Kabupaten Bogor, termasuk juga kebijakan lingkungan, ini sudah kita jabarkan di dalam beberapa program. Program yang ada di Kabupaten Bogor itu namanya adalah Panca Karsa. Panca itu artinya 5. Karsa itu keinginan atau tekad. Jadi ada 5 keinginan dan tekad untuk membangun Bogor, yaitu yang pertama adalah Bogor sehat, Bogor cerdas, Bogor maju, Bogor membangun, dan Bogor berkeadaban. Nah, di mana peran perempuan di sini di dalam 5 karsa ini? Semua harus ada perempuan. Perempuan harus mengambil semua peran di dalam pemerintahan daerah. Jadi dalam jadi kita ada kesetaraan, tetapi kesetaraan itu sekali lagi kuncinya saya selalu menekankan kesetaraan itu tidak diberikan secara gratis. Jadi kesetaraan itu harus direbut oleh masing-masing orang. Jadi saya selalu bilang bahwa Kabupaten Bogor ini butuh orang-orang yang bisa bekerja. Kami atau saya menilai orang itu tidak perseorangan. Jadi, tetapi ada tagline di Kabupaten Bogor yang saya camkan adalah tidak ada Superman atau Superwoman, tetapi adanya super team. Jadi seorang perempuan juga harus bisa bekerja dengan tim, harus bisa berkoordinasi, berkolaborasi dengan dinas-dinas yang lain atau dengan lembaga-lembaga yang lain. Artinya, ketika terbentuk suatu tim yang hebat, maka akan ada sesuatu yang hebat pula, begitu. Apakah itu hasil kerja, apakah itu inovasi-inovasi yang selalu saya tekankan kepada OPD bahwa inovasi adalah selalu mendapatkan tempat yang terbaik ya di dalam satu pemerintahan atau satu lembaga. Dan kebetulan juga selain Bupati, saya juga Ketua DPW P3 Jawa Barat, itu pun saya terapkan kepada partai. Artinya kesempatan untuk meraih itu harus berebut. Ya, harus berebut dan tetapi kita tetap kepada undang-undang 30% ini juga sangat menolong sekali ya. Ketika ada bahwa 30% perempuan ini harus ada, ini tentunya harus dipaksakan ketika di dalam ranah politik. Karena apa? Biasanya perempuan ada kecenderungan untuk tidak mau bertarung atau ketika dianggap bahwa perempuan ini selalu berada di belakang, itu tidak berlaku di Jawa Barat. Jadi perempuan juga harus bisa bersaing. Jadi ketika saya memang melihat kemampuan dari seorang perempuan, ketika dalam pencalegan saja, ketika dia lebih mampu dari bapak-bapak atau laki-laki yang lain, tetapi dia harus berada di posisi tertinggi, ya kita berikan posisi tertinggi itu untuk perempuan, misalkan di nomor 1 begitu. Karena dari kemampuannya, yang bapak-bapak yang ngalah ya silahkan nomor 2 atau nomor 3 begitu. Jadi tidak ada ada pengecualian untuk bapak-bapak, tetapi ketika perempuan itu mampu merebut, ini harus diberikan tempat yang layak, ada yang memang layak diberikan kepada perempuan, karena memang dari upaya untuk berebut dan untuk keinginan untuk mendapatkan hasil yang maksimal juga ini harus dimulai dari bagaimana kita juga menempatkan dia di tempat yang baik begitu. Di daerah lain juga tentunya punya kebijakan yang sama untuk perempuan, artinya hakikat kebijakan ramah perempuan dan lingkungan itu sesungguhnya sudah menjadi kebijakan nasional dan juga kebijakan dari seluruh daerah begitu. Jadi tentunya tadi ketika kebijakan itu ada di daerah, kita juga harus isi dengan beberapa lembaga-lembaga yang khusus mengurusi, misalkan kebijakan publik di perempuan. Saya membentuk Pusat Pelayanan Terpadu Pemberdayaan Perempuan dan Anak. Itu namanya PT 2 TPA. Lalu ada KPAD juga untuk anak ya. Lalu forum anak yang khusus, kalau forum anak itu diurus oleh anak-anak. Jadi ada forum yang dibentuk diurus oleh anak-anak dari mulai SMA sampai SD. Jadi di situ anak-anak dilatih ya untuk bagaimana dia bisa berbicara di muka umum dan lain-lain. Jadi selain itu KPAD itu Komisi Perlindungan Anak Daerah juga sudah dibentuk. Lalu ada dinas juga, Dinas Pemberdayaan Perempuan dan Perlindungan Anak, ini khusus juga mengurusi perempuan-perempuan di daerah, di desa-desa yang tersebar di 435 desa dan kelurahan. Ini juga ada khusus dinas yang mengurus tentang itu. Karena masih ketimpangan sosial di masyarakat itu juga masih ada. Lalu kekerasan terhadap anak dan keluarga juga ada, terhadap perempuan apalagi. Jadi ini juga ada yang khusus mengurusi tentang hal-hal yang berkaitan dengan perempuan dan anak. Lalu untuk lingkungan di Kabupaten Bogor juga sudah ada Perda Bogor Antik, yaitu anti plastik. Perbuk maksud saya, Perbuk nomor 13 tahun 2019 yang melarang pemakaian plastik besar-besaran. Kita sudah harus ramah lingkungan, artinya toko-toko Indomaret juga sudah tidak lagi memakai plastik, tetapi bawa kantong sendiri dari rumah. Juga ada Kampung Ramah Lingkungan atau KRL. KRL ini adalah termasuk pemberdayaan perempuan di tingkat desa, RT, RW, sampai ke RT, RW. Artinya masyarakat sudah memilah-milah, mulai memilah-milah sampah dari rumah, apakah sampah organik, sampah plastik, ataupun sampah lainnya. Nah ini dapat menghasilkan. Jadi ada pengepul yang mengumpulkan barang-barang yang sudah dipisahkan oleh ibu-ibu untuk kemudian dijual kembali dan mempunyai nilai ekonomi. Dan ada juga sudah ada koperasinya, juga sudah ada yang namanya zakat sampah, yaitu bagi yang merelakan sampahnya untuk jadi sesuatu, ya artinya dijual dapat uang, atau hasil karya plastiknya itu menjadi sesuatu barang yang berguna. Uangnya ini oleh masing-masing RT RW dikumpulkan untuk memberikan bantuan kepada fakir miskin seperti janda, anak yatim dan lain-lain. Jadi dari sampah juga itu sudah bisa menghasilkan uang. Dan salah satu penghargaan dari kita untuk KRL, setiap tahun kita berikan juara-juara untuk KRL terbaik, yaitu berupa subsidi. Selain subsidi peralatan juga ada subsidi untuk pembiayaan untuk membiayai program-program mereka. Jadi itu. Jadi sebetulnya kalau kita sama-sama membangun ya untuk bagaimana pemberdayaan perempuan bisa jalan, ini sebetulnya kita juga bisa menghambat proses yang tadinya bagaimana ada idiom ya, ada namanya kendala biasanya kalau perempuan biasanya dihambatnya oleh perempuan begitu. Nah ini jangan ada terjadi lagi, sebab kalau kita lihat di beberapa kejadian di partai politik ya, kenapa perempuan tidak terpilih, jarang terpilih. Kenapa anggota DPRD yang dari 55 orang hanya 4 orang anggota DPRD? Kenapa enggak setengahnya? Karena jumlah penduduk itu 55% laki-laki, 50% perempuan. Seharusnya minimalnya 40% perempuan anggota dewan atau 60% laki-laki. Tetapi kenapa perempuan sendiri tidak berminat untuk memilih perempuan? Nah itu juga harus menjadi mungkin penelitian kita ke masa datang supaya perempuan tertarik memilih perempuan begitu loh. Jadi sekarang kan kendalanya perempuan juga nggak milih perempuan. Karena apa? Karena memang dari jumlah penduduk hak pilih perempuan itu juga hampir sama dengan bapak-bapak atau laki-laki. Tetapi kenapa pada saat hasilnya perempuan ini selalu sedikit yang terpilih begitu. Nah ini juga harus ada sosialisasi barangkali perempuan pilih perempuan itu lebih baik karena perempuan akan lebih memperhatikan perempuan. Itu mungkin. Kalau kepala daerah mungkin lebih sempit. Bisa saja tidak harus perempuan pilih perempuan karena kepala daerah dilihat dari karena sedikit figur, jadi mungkin saya terpilih juga barangkali karena apa ya, ya mungkin dilihat dari, ya nggak tahu, saya juga tidak mau apa ya, yaitu hak masyarakat mungkin percaya kepada perempuan itu lebih bagus ya, lebih baik, sehingga sebagai perempuan ini adalah tantangan dan saya harus bisa menjawab tantangan itu dengan memberikan program-program yang jelas dan bermanfaat untuk masyarakat, juga untuk perempuan. Dan kebangkitan UMKM juga ini menjadi PR saya ke depan, karena UMKM ini rata-rata perempuan. Jadi 80% UMKM yang ada di wilayah saya itu adalah perempuan, sehingga bagaimana dalam pemberdayaan ekonomi, dalam mengatasi pandemi ini supaya mereka bangkit, ini juga menjadi tugas yang sangat penting, karena ibu-ibu biasanya lebih kuat ya, lebih kuat dalam menghadapi tekanan, dalam menghadapi kesulitan. Makanya ini juga kekuatan mereka harus ditopang dengan bantuan-bantuan kita, termasuk kemarin pernah saya luncurkan bantuan UMKM untuk sekitar 15.000 ke semuanya untuk bantuan permodalan, sehingga kita mampu membangkitkan kembali bagaimana UMKM ini bisa berdiri. Perempuan itu sebetulnya kalau kita amati, Mbak, mungkin saya kenal dengan beberapa yang hadir di sini, sebagian mungkin juga ada sebagai anggota MPI ya, Maju Perempuan Indonesia, karena saya juga sebagai pengamat, salah satu pengamat di WA Group MPI. Saya melihat banyak perempuan, sosok perempuan yang pekerja keras ya, multitasking, berprestasi. Nah, ini tentunya saya sebagai anggota, saya hanya menyoroti dan melihat. Nah, apa yang harus menjadi langkah kita ke depan ketika kita melihat bahwa banyak perempuan-perempuan yang maju, termasuk Ibu Septi, Ibu Titi, dan lain-lain. Berarti tugas kita adalah mempersiapkan kader, karena kita pasti akan tua ya, umur kita akan bertambah. Nah, bagaimana PR yang sangat yang harus segera kita lakukan adalah bagaimana kita menyiapkan kader untuk ke depan, perempuan-perempuan ke depan. Jadi kita pasti ada selesainya ya, ada waktu liburnya karena usia, mungkin tuntutan keluarga, cucu, dan lain-lain. Nah, ini kita harus siap-siap untuk mengkaderkan perempuan-perempuan yang hebat ke masa depan. Dan sekali lagi, prestasi itu bukan diraih hanya menunggu giliran. Jadi kita harus jemput dan rebut lewat kompetensi dan prestasi. Insya Allah ketika kita terus mengembangkan berbagai pendekatan yang lebih spesifik untuk meningkatkan kompetensi dan peran perempuan dalam pembangunan, kita bisa juga menciptakan perempuan-perempuan yang lebih hebat daripada kita yang ada di sini ya. Dan tentunya kebijakan ya, terkait kebijakan yang ramah terhadap perempuan ini juga sangat diperlukan di berbagai sektor, tidak hanya di pemerintah daerah tetapi juga di provinsi, di pusat. Ini juga harus lebih ramah terhadap kebijakan perempuan. Harus lebih ditingkatkan lagi, karena perempuan ini bukan hanya objek ya, tetapi juga bagaimana kita peningkatan melalui pemberdayaan sumber daya manusia, dan juga tidak hanya pemberdayaan tapi infrastrukturnya pun disiapkan ya, infrastruktur yang menunjang pemberdayaan itu disiapkan. Jangan sampai kita hanya melakukan pelatihan untuk pemberdayaan SDM tetapi infrastruktur tidak dipersiapkan, sehingga apa yang sudah kita berikan kepada perempuan-perempuan tersebut akhirnya menjadi tidak dipakai atau tidak digunakan gitu. Dan tenaga kerja juga ini di pabrik-pabrik di lingkungan Jawa Barat terutama ini juga lebih banyak perempuan. Bagaimana perlindungan terhadap buruh juga ini harus menjadi perhatian khusus, karena buruh juga sebagai roda ya yang bergerak lebih cepat untuk devisa, dan juga kesejahteraan juga harus lebih diperhatikan. Kita juga harus lebih banyak memberikan sosialisasi kepada perusahaan-perusahaan. Dan itu barangkali saya tidak banyak karena memang waktunya sebentar, tapi sekali lagi perempuan tidak hanya untuk wilayah domestik, tetapi perempuan juga punya kesempatan di wilayah-wilayah lain yang cukup besar dan lebih besar, dan bagaimana memaksimalkan perempuan ini adalah menjadi tugas kita bersama supaya mereka lebih berdaya, lebih mandiri dan lebih tangguh dalam menghadapi tantangan zaman. Apalagi di masa pandemi 19 ini COVID-19, perempuan tangguh, perempuan hebat tentunya sangat dibutuhkan baik oleh keluarga maupun oleh masyarakat. Terima kasih, itu saja saya.
Nah, Ade, karena Teh Ade kan tidak bisa bergabung sampai akhir, izinkan saya saja nih yang menggali minimal satu pertanyaan sebelum Teh Ade melanjutkan kegiatan. Tadi kan Teh Ade mengatakan bahwa justru kendalanya yang menghambat perempuan atau bahkan tidak mau memilih calon pemimpin perempuan atau anggota legislatif perempuan itu justru perempuan sendiri gitu. Nah, ada risetnya pasti yang menunjukkan mengapa preferensi mereka cenderung tidak ke perempuan tapi ke calon-calon laki-laki. Yang ingin saya tanya, kalau berdasarkan pengalaman atau mungkin hasil riset yang Teh Ade lihat, apakah ini ada masalah mungkin kultur atau ada masalah pendidikan, level pendidikan, jadi mereka mungkin belum terlalu cukup memperoleh edukasi. Dan bagaimana Teh Ade mengatasi masalah ini di Bogor? Karena kita tahu Bogor itu kan kabupaten dengan jumlah penduduk terbesar, wilayahnya luas. Sebagai wilayah yang merupakan tetangganya ibu kota nih, yang challenge-nya juga pasti tidak main-main. Bagaimana Teh Ade berhasil bisa menang kemarin dalam kontestasi ketika kondisinya seperti itu gitu. Saya ingin dengar nih penjelasan Teh Ade sebelum Teh Ade meninggalkan forum ini.
Ya, baik. Tadi saya sampaikan bahwa perempuan tidak berpihak kepada perempuan. Padahal saya pernah punya jargon perempuan pilih perempuan, karena sebetulnya saya juga pernah jadi pengurus KPPI di Kabupaten Bogor dan saya selalu sampaikan jargon itu bahwa perempuan pilih perempuan. Tetapi faktanya ketika pilkada saja, contohnya pilkada, jadi menurut survei itu ternyata perempuan itu lebih banyak tersebar, artinya tidak fokus di perempuan. Dari suara saya misalkan dari 5 calon, karena hak pilih pada saat itu sekitar 3,5 juta ya, 3,5 juta, ini cukup besar juga. Dari 5 calon itu saya merebut kurang lebih 1 juta orang yang ternyata begitu dia disurvei, diamati, karena ada tim yang memang mengamati, ternyata dari sampai RT RW ke ini ternyata lebih kepada pemilih perempuan ini cenderung mereka memilih berdasarkan ajakan, tetapi bukan berdasarkan keinginan sendiri atau berdasarkan bahwa saya ini itu perempuan harus saya bela, tidak, tetapi berdasarkan pengaruh ya, pengaruh atau mungkin kultur juga ya, pengaruh kultur dan pendidikan. Jadi rata-rata memang wanita di Kabupaten Bogor ini pendidikannya di bawah SMA ya, bahkan SD, SMP juga lebih banyak, sehingga ajakan itu lebih berpengaruh daripada sikap ya, sikap terhadap saya perempuan harus milih perempuan, tidak begitu, tetapi ajakan ada tetangganya yang tim sukses, keluarganya yang tim sukses, atau mungkin ada hal yang mempengaruhi dia untuk memilih seseorang padahal dia tidak kenal. Nah, ini juga menjadi salah satu yang mungkin harus jadi objek penelitian juga, ketika dia tidak kenal tetapi ada sesuatu hal yang menurut dia, wah saya harus memilih itu. Ya, ini juga menjadi pengaruh, artinya something lah ya, saya nggak harus bilang.
Jadi belum menjadi pemilih yang independen ya?
Belum. Jadi
baik. Mungkin ini PR-nya juga mengedukasi para pemilih untuk terutama perempuan menjadi pemilih yang independen, yang memiliki kemantapan untuk memilih berdasarkan nuraninya sendiri. Terima kasih banyak. Saya mohon tepuk tangannya untuk Teh Ade. Di tengah kesibukannya sudah berkenan bergabung. Selamat melanjutkan aktivitas. Mudah-mudahan nanti kita bertemu lagi di kesempatan yang berbeda. Pas sekali waktunya sudah 20 menit, kita lanjutkan ke pembicara berikutnya. Karena ini pembicaranya, kita sudah masuk ke pembicara yang berbahasa Inggris, izinkan. Now let us continue the forum with our speakers from abroad. We'd like to give us short opening remark a little bit, that the second national work meeting or Rakernas activity here is hoped to be able to provide input and recommendations to policymakers to strengthen affirmative policies for women's representation in Parliament. So we do hope that this forum will be able to provide information from all our speakers, both from Indonesia. We have just heard the presentation given by the Regent of Bogor. Just for your information, speakers, Madam Ade Yasin is the Regent of Bogor. Bogor is a regency in the province of West Java. This is the most densely populated regency in Indonesia, so she faces great challenges in leading this area. And she has just shared with us her experiences and told us what the challenges are. So hopefully we will see more and more strong women leaders. In this forum, we would like to hear the success stories and experiences of women in building democracy. We have also hope that we'd get inputs from your side and the contribution of women in your countries in promoting women's representation, political education, prevention of corruption, regulations relating to women, children, and family issues, also about green environment, economic development, and other strategic issues. So let us now go to our second speaker. From Timor-Leste, we have Elfina Sosa Caravalo. Allow me to introduce Madam Elfina Sosa Caravalo briefly. She was first time elected to the parliament in 2017 and was re-elected in the early election held in May 2018. Born on the 18th of July, 1986, and a Timorese native, she is a graduate of international relations from Universidad de Paz. Elfina built her political career by ascending party leadership, by securing the presidency of the women's wing organization, namely Partido Democrático, or Democratic Party, in 2011. She was elected Second Vice Secretary General for the Women's Wings. In early January 2017, she was elected as President of the Democratic Women's Organization. Amazing. Currently, she serves as Secretary of Parliament, Standing Committee for Foreign Affairs, Defense and Security, Secretary of the Parliamentary Women Caucus, and Elfina is an alumnus of the Konrad Adenauer School for Young Politicians. So, for your information, all speakers, this forum is held with strict adherence to health protocols, just in case you're questioning why I'm not wearing my mask. We have all undergone swab antigen tests just recently, so everybody here has tested negative for COVID-19. So now I would like to present the forum to Madam Elfina Sosa Caravalo. Are you with us? Mrs. Caravalo? Let us see if Mrs. Caravalo is online. No, she's not with us yet. Okay, kalau begitu kita menuju ke speaker berikutnya. Mau dicoba dulu dengan menghubungi atau kita loncat saja ke speaker berikutnya? Okay, let us see if our third speaker here has joined us from the Philippines. We have Rana and Caritos. Are you with us, Madam Caritos?
Yes, I'm with everyone in the room.
If you don't mind, then we will go straight to you, but I will explain briefly, introduce you to the forum participants here, because this forum is also open for public. So we have a lot of participants joining us via Zoom. So Attorney Ona Caritos, an advocate of elections since her law school days in Ateneo de Manila University, has now been serving as Executive Director of Lente, Legal Network for Truthful Elections, for 7 years. Ona spearheaded policy and legal reform efforts as the Executive Director of Lente that resulted to, amongst others, Election Service Reform Act, which provides public school teachers the choice on whether or not to serve as poll workers in elections. Secondly, the policy for COMELEC. I'm sorry, please correct me if I mentioned this wrong. Is it COMELEC?
Yes,
Okay.
it's correct. You mentioned it
To
correctly.
have accessible voting centers and separate polling places for Indigenous peoples, and the creation of the Vulnerable Sectors Office in Comelec. And she also served as one of the consultants of the Gender and Development Office of the Comelec from 2018 to 2019, and recently finished her stint as an election analyst in Asian Network for Free Elections Election Observation Mission in Sri Lanka. Oh my God, tepuk tangan dulu untuk Ibu Ona Caritos dengan pencapaian yang luar biasa. So, Mrs. Caritos, I present the floor to you. The time allocated for your presentation is 20 minutes, starting from now.
All right. Can somebody authorize me to share my screen for my PowerPoint? My other account, the one
Share
with the
screen.
picture. Before I'm authorized to share my screen, I'm very much would like to say good afternoon to all of everyone who are with us in this room. I would like to say thank you to the Indonesia Political Women Caucus for inviting me and for allowing me to share our experiences in Lente. So, can you share my other account? I have another account, the one with the picture.
Sorry.
I have one account, the one with the picture and not video. That will be the one that I will use for my screen sharing.
The same name, right, Ona?
Yes, Denise,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
So again, thank you to Indonesia Political Women Caucus for organizing this event. This is a very important event for all of us. All right, thank you. So for this afternoon, for the next 20 minutes, I am tasked to talk about civil society's contributive roles in building democracy in the Philippines. So primarily, I will be talking about our experience in the Philippines and our work in Lente, or just like what our very energetic host said earlier, it stands for Legal Network for Truthful Elections. So I'll be starting my presentation now. So we are Lente, and Lente stands for Legal Network for Truthful Elections. And we are an election monitoring organization, and we were formed 2000 or roughly 14 years ago. And we are a traditional election monitoring education because we conduct public education activities, we monitor the electoral process, we network, we form partnerships with like-minded organizations and individuals. Because we are a legal organization, we are composed of lawyers, law students, and paralegals. We pursue accountability by filing cases and assisting clients or individuals who want to file cases against election law violators. Part of our work in pursuing accountability is training people, training the general public and our partners in civil society to draft affidavits and to monitor election violations or election offenses. And lastly, our last function is to lobby and advocate for electoral reforms. Just like what I said earlier, we were formed 14 years ago to monitor the canvassing stage of the electoral process in the Philippines. And for everyone's information, the canvassing stage it's the stage where all the votes are canvassed or consolidated. And before, 14 years ago, our elections was still manual. And probably some of you know, our elections have been automated since 2010. So we've been having automated elections for, I think, 4 or 5 major election cycles already. So 2010, 3 years after we were formed, the Philippines fully transitioned to an automated election system. So in the 2010 NLE, it was a crossroad election for Lente because we were formed primarily to monitor a manual stage in our election. And the Philippines automated its elections 3 years after we were formed. So we were wondering, what will we monitor now? The process is already automated. We can't guard or we can't monitor the machines. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for us to guard the machines. because you can't guard the machine. So we were at a crossroad as an organization because we were wondering what can we do more for the Philippine elections. But we continued monitoring, but focusing on other core activities, like we specialize in conducting public education for indigenous people or the minorities in the Philippines. We focus on for pursuing accountability, teaching people, just like what I said earlier, to draft affidavits, to monitor election offenses or violations of our election laws. And from 2013 onwards, the character of Lente changed because we focus on lobbying and advocating for electoral reforms. And just like what our gracious host mentioned earlier, Lente, together with its partners, it was instrumental in the passage of some important resolutions to increase the access of our electoral cycle, increase the access of the elections to vulnerable sector groups like persons with disability, indigenous peoples, persons deprived of liberty. So all of our efforts were directed towards lobbying and advocating for changes in our election laws and our EMBs, or our election management bodies, policies and resolutions in place for the election. So, for example, when we monitored the election since 2013, we monitored it focusing on the exercise of the right to vote of indigenous peoples or persons with disability or persons deprived of liberty. And because we are another example is when we conduct our public education activities, we don't do it focusing on the general population of the Philippines. We do it focusing on, for example, women, focusing on the young voters, focusing on the vulnerable sectors. So we were actually, our motto was to go where no one was there. So really wanted to reach out to the people or the population where no one was going or where no organization was focusing in. Since then, with our partners from civil society and our partners in our Congress, our legislative branch in the government, our COMELEC, and since then, COMELEC also we are partners with COMELEC, Commission on Elections, our election management body. LEP was able to pass a law, the Election Service and Reform Act. It was able to increase access for indigenous peoples by the provision of accessible voting centers. It was also instrumental. We were also instrumental actually in the creation of a vulnerable sector office in the EMB or in COMELEC. And I will discuss this more later, but we were also instrumental in the insertion of a provision in our campaign finance law or in our campaign finance act or in the implementing rules and regulations of COMELEC as to the Fair Election Act, requiring candidates and political parties to report their official online accounts. And this matters now, especially with how candidates and political parties have migrated to the online world for their campaigning. And it matters more actually now because of the ongoing pandemic. Our traditional campaign face-to-face, it's not happening. And most probably we will have elections in the country next year. Most probably we will not be seeing the traditional campaigning that we have always seen in the country in previous years. So just to elaborate on the Election Service Reform Act and how it relates to women stakeholders in the elections. The Election Service Reform Act, it was a law passed 5 years ago, and it was meant to ensure the protection and safety of women electoral board members or our poll workers in their service during the elections. Because before ESRA, our poll workers were mandated to serve. Our public school teachers, who were composed mostly of women, they were mandated to serve as poll workers in our elections. So with ESRA, our public school teachers, our poll workers, were finally now given the option whether to serve or not in the elections. And because of ESRA, the security concern of teachers, the access of voting centers or where they're assigned, it was minimized because there was a provision in ESRA, in the implementing rules and regulation of ESRA, that women should not be assigned to areas where security is a concern, where it is very far, or in areas where it's likely to cause gender-based violence, or are likely to result in physical, sexual, or psychological harm, difficulty, or suffering. So that was the intersection of this law with women poll worker concerns in our elections. Another win for us in terms of policy work is the Accessible Voting Center for Indigenous peoples in the Philippines. Basically, our IPs or our minorities, they're located far away from the voting centers. And one example that I always use, some IPs, they walk for 5 to 6 hours for them to reach the voting center, for them to exercise their right to vote. So this accessible voting center is basically we situated or we transferred the accessible voting center or the voting center located in the center of the cities or municipalities to the communities of the indigenous peoples. This way, the IPs or our minorities, they don't have to walk for 5 to 6 hours anymore because the accessible voting center is right smack in the middle of their community. And aside from solving the distance concern, another solution, another problem solved by this accessible voting center was the discriminations, the harassments, the threats faced by the IPs whenever they walk for long hours and whenever they venture into unknown territory. So that was those were the major problems addressed by this accessible voting center for the IPs. And another win for us, for civil society and all our partners in the Philippines is the creation of a vulnerable sector office in our election management body. The VSO basically is primarily devoted to ensuring the right to political participation of vulnerable sector groups like persons with disability, indigenous peoples, the minorities, and persons deprived of liberty. So now we have an office in the commission or in our election management body focusing on the concerns, the issues, the challenges faced by these members of the vulnerable groups. Another win that we managed to get to ensure or to build democracy in the Philippines is because social media is the game changer in our elections, not only in the Philippines, not only Indonesia, but all over the world. So we needed to find ways to still monitor how candidates and political parties use social media and their expenses. So in 2019, just 2 years ago, with the partnership with a partnership with COMELEC was able to require political parties and candidates to report their official online accounts. So basically, COMELEC now can, in theory, in paper, they can now monitor how much candidates are spending in the online space. So that's another innovation in our election procedure and legal framework. So right now, we're working on this on this 5 reform tracks in Lente. So we're working on the passage of another bill, the COMELEC Integrity Bill, which basically gives our election management body their own field offices. Because right now, our legal framework in the Philippines, it provides that the local government units are the ones providing for the field spaces for the EMBs. And clearly, there's conflict of interest in that framework or in that setup. Another reform that we're working on is on disinformation and elections. I know Indonesia also faces this problem, the problem of fake news, disinformation, trolls, bots. So we're working on an anti-troll bill. Basically, we're exploring the requirement of identification for users of online social platforms. Because our theory is, if you require the identification from the users of these online social media platforms, our problems of trolls, our problem with trolls, with bot accounts would be solved because they can't enroll more than once because they only have one identity. We're also working on a code of conduct for PR firms and individuals engaged in political propaganda. Our theory here is because these PR firms and individuals, they are the ones who are in the front line of building this troll network, of building this propaganda, of they're in the middle actually of the fake news, disinformation wave in the Philippines. So we're talking currently with PR firms and organizations and with COMELEC to have this code of conduct. It's a norm building document, and it's also a document to highlight the problem of fake news, disinformation in the elections. And we're also working on the BARM Electoral Code because for everyone's information, the BARM or the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region for Muslim Mindanao was just recently passed. So there's now a parliamentary government for our Bangsamoro region, and there's a need for a new electoral code, so we're working on that as well. And later I will discuss some provision which we would want to be inserted in the code for increased women's political participation. This political party financing research we did with Perluda, with Ninis, and with Tita, and we're really much happy with the result of that research. And we're also doing elections during COVID research as well, because just like what you face in your elections a few months ago, we don't want elections to be postponed just because of our problem of COVID or of the pandemic. Okay, just to say it briefly, so the Bangsamoro Electoral Code, this is our proposed Bangsamoro Electoral Code for the BARM, and in sections 38, 40, 41, there are provisions to increase women's political participation in the Bangsamoro region. So we have a super system that we want to be in place for the parliamentary system in the Bangsamoro. So you will be getting a copy of this presentation so that you could go over more this section of my presentation. Because I think I'm running out of time. Just to highlight our current efforts during COVID. So we're working on a code of conduct for elections during COVID, because our theory is elections should push through in the Philippines on May 9, 2022. There should be no excuses coming from our government, coming from our election management body, that the elections would not push through because of the ongoing pandemic. So how will we do that? So we will take into consideration all the protocols, all the necessary health protocols to ensure that transmission would be lessened or it will be negated. Plus, we also be taking into consideration election laws, rules, and regulations. And if we add the two together, so we would want to have COVID-45 laws and policies. So in all of our work, the framework of Lente is using the standards of a safe, accountable, transparent, inclusive elections. And basically, when we have safe, accountable, transparent, inclusive elections, there is nationwide public confidence in the election results. So we're using this hashtag, sa atin ang election. This is a Tagalog word, and if you translate it in English, it means that we own the elections. That's the meaning of hashtag, sa atin ang election. In English, it means we own the elections. So this will be the second, I think, to the last slide of my presentation. I'm sorry, Ninis and TT, if I'm going over time. So how do we do all of this? How do we do all of this work? Basically, we always conduct consultations. So we always do it in partnership with our election commission, with different election stakeholders like political parties, election lawyers, other election monitoring organizations, the legislature, and the technologies or the experts when it comes to information technology. And because of COVID, we also started discussing with non-traditional election stakeholders like doctors. So we always have inclusive consultations with our partners. And based from these consultations, we draft policies and amendments to laws. And aside from drafting policies and amendments to laws, we also lobby and advocate for these changes in policies and laws. So just like what I mentioned earlier, Lente, together with its partners, with its valuable partners coming from all our areas of reform, we were able to manage to pass a law, manage to pass three policy changes in our election management body. So that's how we do our election work in the Philippines, and that's how CSOs contribute to democracy building in the Philippines or in our country. And lastly, so it really pays, just to share with everyone, it pays to do your homework, because while we were doing our paper on elections during COVID, one of our legislature, one of our congressman, one of our legislator said in a public hearing at the House of Representatives in our Congress that he's seeking to postpone the 2022 elections due to pandemic. And it was really, it was destiny, because we were just finished with our paper. So when Representative Arroyo came out with that statement calling for the postponement of our elections, we came out with this paper and we came out with a statement to postponement of the election. So there was resistance right away from the part of civil society. So again, that's a clear exercise of democracy building coming from the civil society perspective or end. So we always say in Lente, we need to adapt to evolve, and evolve to adapt, because times are changing and we should not be contented with how we do our work in the old, with how we do our work before. So we always have to adjust our strategies. We always have to adjust our methodologies whenever we want to pursue reform work, especially when it concerns elections and the right to political participation, women's political participation. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, everyone. Again, thank you very much to the Indonesian Women for Political Caucus for inviting Lente and inviting me to share our work in the Philippines. Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon to all of us again.
Thank you very much. Tepuk tangan untuk Attorney Ona Caritos. Perfect timing, amazing. It's just exactly 20 minutes. And I would like to say maraming salamat po.
Terima kasih.
Yeah. So I hope you will remain with us until the end of the session, because there will be a Q&A. Will you still be with us?
Yes, I will be staying.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. So now let's proceed to our next speaker from Bangladesh. I hope at present Wasika Ayesha Khan has joined us. Before I present the forum to Wasika Ayesha Khan, I would like to read briefly her bio. Wasika Ayesha Khan is a member of Parliament of Bangladesh Awami League, who served her first term representing reserved women's seat 31 in the 10th Parliament of Bangladesh from 2014 to 2018. Wasika is the incumbent member of Parliament representing reserved women's seat 7 for her second term in the 11th Parliament of Bangladesh. She is the 4th generation from her family serving as a parliamentarian and the daughter of freedom fighter Ataur Rahmat Khan Kaiser. In the beginning, Wasika worked for numerous banks, so she was in the banking world. But then she left this banking world to take her oath as member of parliament in 2014. And she, during the first term as a parliamentarian, she served in the Public Accounts Committee as well as the Committee on Estimates. Wasika was elected in 2015 to represent the women parliamentarians of the Asia Pacific countries in the Inter-Parliamentary Union for a 3-year term. She served as Vice President in the Central Committee of Bangladesh Mohila Awami League from 2017, actively involved in parliamentarians for nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament, the Climate Parliament, and the Asian Women Parliamentary Caucus. She was also nominated by the Honorable Speaker of Parliament to the Senate for her alma mater, Chittagong University, during her first term. Wasika is also a member of the Parliamentary Caucus on Child's Rights in her second term, and she is currently serving as the Finance and Planning Secretary of Bangladesh Awami League. So, Madam Wasika Ayesha Khan, are you with us?
Assalamu alaikum, sisters. Yes, I am. Thank you.
Waalaikum salam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So, as the other speakers also were given 20 minutes, so now I would allocate 20 minutes for you. The forum is yours.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and a privilege to be speaking in this forum of Indonesian women in politics. I thank Ibu Septiawati for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share the experience of Bangladesh with this August gathering. Women face many challenges in politics as well as in other sectors. It is a global issue, not restricted to Asia or Bangladesh or Indonesia. Bangladesh attained its independence in 1971. Women participated actively in that war. We lost 3 million lives. Almost 300,000 women were raped by the Pakistan Army and its collaborators. So the emergence of Bangladesh had women's active participation from the very beginning. The first constitution of Bangladesh was made in 1972. Our father of the nation, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, introduced reserved seats for women in the parliament. He also included a woman minister in his cabinet. Then came the Representative of the People Order in 1972, and which with various amendments till now, it requires, the RPA requires political parties to reserve at least 33% of all committee positions for women. In the party in power in Bangladesh, Bangladesh Awami League, including myself, there are 15 plus female members in the Central Committee. At present, our Prime Minister, Speaker of the Parliament, 3 ministers, and the Leader of the Opposition in Parliament are women. 22 women MPs have been directly elected in the present Parliament, and there are 50 reserved seats in Parliament for women. At 21%, Bangladesh has one of the highest representation of women in the Parliament. In the local governments also, there are 30% seats earmarked for women. They take part in elections and are elected to the local government bodies. That has made a lot of difference to ensure women empowerment in Bangladesh. The Global Gender Gap Index, brought out by World Economic Forum, puts Bangladesh for the 6th time at the top in South Asia in women's overall empowerment. We are ranked 50th globally among 149 nations and ranked 7th in women's political empowerment in the world. our Honorable Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, is serving her third consecutive term as the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Her fourth term, and the third consecutive term. Her visionary leadership has actually brought Bangladesh in this position where women are given equal opportunities in politics and in other spheres of economic development. Women make up 40% of Bangladesh's paid workforce outside agriculture. There are female workers who are who go abroad for overseas employment. Government has implemented overseas employment policy and acts to ensure their safety and security. Nearly 1,500 women armed forces and police officials have served in the UN peacekeeping operations. Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has pledged to raise women's participation in the workforce leading to 50-50 by 2041. That will have a huge impact on the GDP of Bangladesh. She reiterates, I quote, "We see women as active agents of development, not as passive recipients." There have been various policy implementations by the Honorable Prime Minister and interventions to ensure women's empowerment in Bangladesh. To name a few, Women Development Policy of 2011, access to primary, secondary, and tertiary level education through incentivizing girls' enrollment, which has resulted in almost 100% enrollment of girl child in primary education. Millions of girl students are given stipends so that they can stay and complete their education. This has helped Bangladesh attain gender parity. There are projects and disbursements of SME credit for women entrepreneurs. In each budget, a certain amount is set as earmarked for given as loans to women entrepreneurs. There is increased access to microfinance for rural women, gender responsive budget allocations. In the financial year 2019-20, a fund equivalent to $19 billion was given for women development, which was almost 5.5% of Bangladesh GDP. There are training facilities and capacity building initiatives for women to engage in income generating activities. All ministries have to make gender responsive budget allocations. There are value-added tax exemptions for women entrepreneurs and various social justice and safety nets for vulnerable women. In short, I have tried to share the Bangladesh experience with you. It is actually important to have political will, not just policies. We are fortunate that we have a visionary leader, the Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. She ensures the political will and ensures proper participation of women in the economic development of Bangladesh. Because any country cannot progress leaving half its population behind. And it was very encouraging to participate in the meeting and hear about Indonesia, our Bangladesh's very valued partner country, and to hear about the Philippines. And I feel that we are in this together. Women everywhere should come together and ensure that we are progressing at the same pace. We cannot afford to leave anyone behind. And that will make a better world. I convey my greetings to the Indonesian people through KPPI, from the people of Bangladesh, from the women of Bangladesh, and I hope that my short presentation has given you all a glimpse of where Bangladesh is today, and where Bangladesh wants to be in the next, 30 years, 40 years. And it's a pleasure to share the experience and learn from you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Washika Ayusha Khan from Bangladesh. Tepuk tangannya. It's a great honor and definitely a pleasure to have you with us in this forum. We hope you will still remain with us until the very end to join us in the Q&A session. And now let us go to our fourth speaker. I hope that Ibu Elfina Sosa Caravalo from Timor-Leste has been able to join us because she was experiencing network problems because very weak connection there. Are you with us now? Madam Elfina Sosa Caravalo? Can you hear us? Ibu Carvalho, are you going to be presenting addressing your presentation in English or in Bahasa Indonesia? I was told that you are very fluent in Bahasa Indonesia.
Okay.
Selamat sore.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Selamat sore, everyone.
Selamat sore, terima kasih sudah bergabung. Jadi akan disampaikan pemaparannya dalam bahasa Indonesia ya, Ibu Elfina Sosa Caravalo.
Oke. Good afternoon everyone. Maaf saya sudah mempersiapkan materi saya di English.
Oh, oke, baik.
I
Tidak
hope you don't
apa-apa.
mind.
Ada penterjemah untuk forum yang di sini. So whichever language would be most comfortable for you, most convenient, you're free to use whichever language. So 20 minutes, the time allocated for your presentation, starting from now.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Distinguished participant, honorable MPs, Kaukus Perempuan Politik Indonesia. Terima kasih sudah mengundang saya untuk menghadiri rapat kerja nasional KPPI. I'm truly honored to participate in this KPPI Rakernas, and I was told that I have to present to you about women and election campaign in Timor-Leste. So, Timor-Leste, as you all know, that it's a young democratic nation which uphold the principles of democracy, rule of law, and the protection of human rights. Since its independence, 4 presidential elections were conducted, and 6 parliamentary elections were also conducted. So along the period, strong and courageous women have taken decisions to break the political barrier and the obstacles. And so in 2001, the Constituent Assembly election were held. 26% of women were elected, and they played a very important role on passing the Article 17 of our Constitution, which stipulates that a woman and man shall have the same rights and duties in all areas of family, political, economic, cultural, and social rights. So starting from 2001, Timor-Leste started to set several policies to ensure women's political participation. So from 2001, women aware of the legal framework that allows women to participate actively in politics, such as electoral law that stipulates of minimum 30% of quota candidate in the political party list. So in the political party list, women should be put in the winnable positions. And as we all aware that electoral quota have become a popular policy measure to bring women to politics, and it's very effective. So the electoral law also stipulates that any woman who resign or by any reason, maybe by natural causes of fall ill or died, should be replaced by the fellow woman candidates. So all of these are the legal framework that encourages women, that gives women chances to move forward, to step forward, and breaking the barriers. And so the Timorese woman sees the opportunity. And political parties and women's wing organizations in Timor-Leste started to encourage women to participate in politics, conducted trainings and capacity building in cooperation with local and international NGOs, such as local NGOs such as Kaukus Politica, Redi Feto, MOFE, Alola, Patria, and other international institutions or international organizations such as IRI, International Republican Institute, Plan International, and international agencies. So these are some steps that political parties and the women's wing organization use to encourage and then use the every chances they have to step forward in the political arena. So in 2012 parliamentary election, the result was very outstanding. 24 women out of 65 MPs are elected. So it was 35% of women in the parliament. So this marks a significant amount of women in the parliament and become the first country in Asia to obtain 30% of quota. It's an achievement, I can say. And then the following parliamentary elections in 2017 and the early election in 2018, Timor-Leste still meet the quota of 30% women in the parliament. So I would like to share to you that currently we have a female deputy prime minister and the deputy house speaker in the parliament, and some female ministers who are holding important ministries, such as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is a female minister, and then the Minister and the Vice Minister of Social and Solidarity, and the Minister of Health. So this, I can say that ever since we got independence, we have achieved, I can say we have achieved a lot. This is a tremendous advance that we have experienced. And so despite all the challenges, all the barriers that woman faces, I discovered that the Timorese women are courageous, because as other countries, we do come from a patriarchal society, and being in the political position, being in public offices is an achievement, and it is not easy. It is not easy to obtain such positions. But from my own experience, I can say that it turns out that women who hold a position in politics, who hold public offices, are required to empower other women, to inspire other women, and to empower other women. So whenever we as a parliamentarian, or we are as a female minister, we fail them, so we discourage them. So it is not a burden, but it is a responsibility that every female MP should take the responsibility. We have to represent the woman. We have to represent them well. We have to represent the people. We have to represent them well. Because if we fail them, we fail the woman. They will lose their lose their respect, or they will lose their expectation against women. So I can say that we inspire other women. So I think I will open for some questions. but for now, I think it's I will say that I have a very very short presentation, and I'm ready for the question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibu Elfina Sosa Caravalo. Tepuk tangannya untuk sahabat kita dari Timor Leste. And now let's proceed to our final or fifth speaker from the United Kingdom. Hopefully, our last speaker has been able to join us due to her very hectic schedule. It's a great honor and pleasure to have Sofia Fernandez joining us in this forum. She is from the United Kingdom, Senior Advisor on Political Inclusion at WFD, or Westminster Foundation for Democracy. Prior to that, she was Interim Regional Director for Asia. Between 2018-2020, Sofia was responsible for leading WFD's Commonwealth-wide program, the Commonwealth Partnership for Democracy, where she led innovative inclusion programs across the Commonwealth and in 15 countries across sub-Saharan Africa and Asia to advance political inclusion of women, youth, LGBT+ citizens, and persons with disabilities. Sofia's technical advisor role will expand on this work to integrate political inclusion into program design within the WFD and is responsible for developing tools, resources, and research to support technical assistance in this area. Sofia has extensive experience working in parliamentary strengthening and electoral support programs internationally. Sofia managed international ideas support to electoral processes and democracy program in Myanmar for 3 years, leading a consortium of 8 local and international organizations providing support to the 2014 elections in Myanmar. During this period, she also provided technical support to the Joint Public Accounts Committee at the Union Parliament of Myanmar and to the Parliament of Bhutan. Prior to this, Sofia worked for the Federal Parliament of Australia for 5 years, with the Senate Committee Office serving on the Finance and Public Administration Committee, and subsequently as a researcher with the Parliamentary Library of Australia. Sofia is a published researcher on election systems and processes and on parliamentary procedure, and has particular interest in inclusive politics. Sofia holds a Master of Public Policy Analysis from the Australian National University, awarded with merit, and a Bachelor of Arts for Gender Studies from the University of Melbourne. So good afternoon, Sofia. I'm sorry, it's good morning there, if I'm not mistaken. Is it correct?
Right. Yes, that's right.
What time is it there in your country?
We've just touched on 8 a.m. So it's an early morning Saturday start.
Okay, well, we thank you so much for agreeing to join us. I'm sure you had to do a lot of things in preparation and also wake up quite early, as it is only 8 o'clock there. It is here now 3 p.m. So quite a time difference. We will allocate 20 minutes for your presentation, and after your session, we will go straight to the Q&A session. So the floor or the forum is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the invitation to join the Indonesian Women Political Caucus my morning. I mean, I think this is such an important avenue for discussion here, and I've been really enjoying listening to the previous speakers. And I want to thank you also for your partnership with the Westminster Foundation for Democracy. We've very much enjoyed our work with you and looking forward to working with you closely in the future. At WFD, I work to lead our global research and programs on political inclusion. That does include our portfolio on women's political leadership. And we thought it'd be very interesting and useful for this forum to hear a little bit more about some of the global research we've been doing to look at the impact of gender on democracy, the impact of women's political leadership. And there's some excellent findings from that research. So today I'll be covering what that research covers. I mean, for us at WFD, when we look at women's political leadership, I mean, of course, you look around the world at the official numbers in formal politics, and it's not brilliant. I mean, we've got some parliaments that are reaching 50-50 parity, but around the world, we're sort of hovering still at the very, very low percentage marks. And so for us, we're looking at what does women political leadership mean? And actually, women exercise leadership in the political space, often without the formal title. And so that includes women like you here on this forum today who are attending, who might be political party members, you might be leaders in your community, in your business, but you're not actually officially elected. And if you are elected, congratulations, because that is, as we know, a hurdle that that is hard to overcome. And so we look at what's the political space like for women, what is getting them there, what is hampering them getting there, and what does it mean for democracy. So we partnered with the Global Institute for Women's Leadership, which is at King's College, London last year, and the GIWL is led by former Prime Minister Julia Gillard, the former Prime Minister of Australia, and we worked with them to produce a literature review that looked at over 500 pieces of academic research over the last 25 years. And we chose that time frame because we were looking at Beijing plus 25 as a bookend, you know, the Gender Action Plan that came out to now. And we looked at the ways in which women's political careers are different from their male counterparts. What's standing in their way from being political leaders, and what impact, as I said, has their political presence had on democracy, but also on policy making. And what we found was that women political leaders have fundamentally reshaped the frameworks of politics and international relations. We found that women work harder than men to represent their constituencies when they are in formal politics. And this is leading in some countries to an increased sense of public trust of the parliamentary institution when they see that women are representing their constituency needs directly or addressing those constituency needs. And we've definitely made that correlation that they are doing that better and harder than men in that space. Women in politics tend to use more inclusive and cooperative styles of leadership and representation. So they're challenging some of that political environment that can be very combative, very aggressive, very adversarial, and they're reshaping that to have discussions that bring in communities, bring in people who are most disadvantaged or most impacted by legislation and policy into the design of that legislation and policy. But that also means that women, particularly when there is a bulk of women, an aggregate of women in that formal political space, are prioritizing policy that benefits women. So that probably wouldn't have been prioritized by men previously. So particularly on equal rights and on legislation such as addressing gender-based violence and violence against women and girls. But women are also expanding the remit of what government would consider their policy priorities. Women are bringing in policy prioritization that benefits the most vulnerable in society, including through healthcare, through welfare, infrastructure, through education policy, and they're bringing in their experience to that policy making. So women tend to be the sort of end user of those types of policies in life. You know, we know that women tend to be the ones in families, for example, that have to navigate taking children to the doctor, for example, you know, and what does that mean when you're talking about access to healthcare? And so overall, what we're saying is that the picture's a good one. When women are exercising their leadership, their political leadership, when women are elected, but also women have political space, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in the context of caucuses in a minute, what we see is societies that tend to be more equal, more caring, more healthier. And in a post-COVID world, or what we hope to be a post-COVID world, this would be an ideal. So when we say when we're trying to build this case, to all the people that do detract from why, who ask the question about why should we have women in politics, or why should women be there? The case is very, very clear. The other really interesting finding that was in the report is that globally, at every form of government, whether it's national, subnational, or local government, the presence of women is directly correlated with lower levels of both petty and grand corruption. And so this is across the world. We've seen this in Asia, we've seen this in Europe, we've seen this in Africa, and it's something that a lot of theorists who are working on corruption theory are seeing as a phenomena, both in terms of women themselves perhaps being less corrupt when they enter politics, but also an aggregate of women resulting in a reduction of corruption. And there's a couple of reasons why. I mean, it's not a causation. So we're not saying that women are somehow more moral than men, but what we're seeing and what we're finding is that women tend to enter politics without having already those collusion networks that men tend to have, that sort of old boys club networks, as they say. Women tend to enter politics without some of those existing networks, and so they're able to actually question some of the practices, particularly around government procurement, around access, particularly to public health, access to medicine, to doctors, to hospitals, and to reshape policy and legislation around that to take away some of those corrupt practices. And so this is a fascinating area of study for us that WFD is looking into further and hoping to publish a little bit more this year. So hopefully next time I speak to you, I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about that. But it is absolutely a global phenomenon. What we're saying, though, in all of this is that while societies tend to be more equal, the vulnerable tend to be addressed when women exercise their political leadership, I'm certainly not saying that more women equals more democracy. I mean, we've certainly seen authoritarian regimes, and in our research we can speak to authoritarian regimes that have very strong gender quota systems, for example. They've got really high numbers of women in their elected space, but then what power do those women have when they're in that space, and whether those women are allowed to, or given the political space to exercise their leadership is another question. So what we're looking at is actually, when we talk about examples all around the world of where women have not only the space to enter politics, but to sustain their political career in a way that's authentic to themselves, recognizes their leadership and values that, then we see these changes that I've just been speaking through. So now that I've painted that picture, which is a pretty, I think, remarkable one, what does this mean in terms of women getting there? What is the current picture? What are some of the barriers to women getting into politics? And some of the past speakers today have spoken to some of this. As an aside, I should just say that our research paper does look more deeply at the impact of women's leadership on policy making, such as on the environment, on health, education, clean water. But I won't cover all of that here, and I think the paper will be shared and is translated into Indonesian. But what is the current baseline? Well, the baseline is true. I mean, it does remain significantly harder for women to enter politics, to create and sustain a career, than it is for men. And there's lots of reasons why that's the case. It's certainly social and religious context, people's understanding of leadership and value of leadership and who they equate as leaders. I mean, during COVID-19, there's been this interesting discussion about women political leaders such as Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, for example, or Sanna Marin in Finland and other countries, and saying that, well, women are handling the COVID-19 crisis much better than men. I don't think it's that simplistic. I mean, you have to look also at the structure of that governance, that society, and what it's done for women in political space. So it's a much bigger trajectory. But on the flip side, you have, certainly political context, certainly violence and abuse. I mean, women candidates and women themselves are more likely to face attacks on their reputation, on their morality, and on their qualifications when they try to and are in the political space. And I'm sure we've all seen examples of that in both your country and around the world. Certainly in the UK, this is a big issue, violence against women in politics. And a few years ago, unfortunately, a female member of parliament was killed in her constituency. You know, this is a phenomena that's affecting women worldwide. So the stakes are a little bit higher when women are trying to enter the political realm. But all in all, I mean, as well as all those barriers, the big barrier to women entering politics is actually political parties. And the reason for this is because political parties still remain the major entry point for any candidate to enter formal politics. And so we've been really interested at looking into, you know, what's happening inside political parties and how can they be part of the solution as gatekeepers to the political realm, particularly for women. And so what we're seeing is sort of the demand and supply side of politics. You know, the supply side is, you know, who's there, who wants to be in politics. And I've had so many political parties say to me, oh, well, women are not interested. And my reaction to that is that's simply not true. Women are interested in politics. Is that they might not have the financing, they might not have the confidence, they might not feel like they're entering a space that is conducive for them to participate. And so political parties actually have a fundamental role to play. And I think, you know, WFD through our program here in Indonesia is working on this as well, to support and facilitate women's entry into politics. Nomination processes, for example, can be very unclear and can discriminate. You know, there's examples of women who have filled up all the necessary requirements, the paperwork, you know, got the support, their backing to be nominated as a candidate, and they come to the nomination process, and suddenly on the day they're told, actually they've forgotten all these other requirements to be a candidate, which they weren't told about before. So it can be a very, you know, there's lots of ways that political parties have tried to keep women out of the process. Women being placed, for example, lower in candidate nomination lists, or not being selected to win winnable seats, if that's relevant in your political context. So what happens when a party is against you yourself, and what role can, for example, women's caucuses play? Well, women caucuses certainly are an excellent space for women because they're key to motivating and engaging women in politics. And this is what we've seen in our research as well, all around the world. Women's caucuses have mobilized to drive and support decisions for greater representation, whether that's mobilizing within a political party, or, for example, mobilizing for the appointment of women to cabinet positions, or trying to find spaces to connect and build networks for women. But it can also be driving forces behind a lot of the policy change that I've just been speaking about before. It's certainly not the case that a woman enters politics, the political space, the formal political space, and is able to push for more equal legislation, for example, or legislation that addresses issues around women's equality without the networks and supports behind them. And women's caucuses play a very important role to push that societal drive and draw that momentum both within the party but outside the party to help the elected woman drive that legislation in the formal space. So that network effect here, you know, we've been saying before that women sometimes enter politics without the usual networks that men have and that men build, you know, in the spaces that men can access. You know, we know that, for example, you know, when men get together in the evening or in the spaces where they can have a drink or whatever it may be, that's where some of the decisions are made, and women don't usually have access to those spaces. Well, the spaces where they do have access to is spaces like this, where women's caucuses and networks are created to amplify the messaging of those MPs. And so it's really important that bodies like these work very closely with those who are in official the formal political space, but also with wider women's rights organizations and civil society, so that there is really a strong gathering of momentum around the work that women are doing. And certainly I know that you yourselves are trying to push for a quota to be realized in the next election. Certainly spaces like this also is the avenue where women can access training that they don't normally access or may not normally access through a political party or through their own resourcing. Training around campaigning, around fundraising, around how to make speeches, all of these sorts of elements that we kind of take for granted that politicians need to have in order to do their job. And it is a fundamental resource for professional development and women's campaigns. So there is a lot of work that we've done in our research piece, and really it's to help build that case. We know that we've been saying for decades now that there should be parity in Parliament because there is parity in our society. We've got over 50% in some countries women in the population, and therefore that should be represented in our democracy, in the setup of our democracy. We also know that argument doesn't always land, and so the research paper really provides those examples that can help you make that case in your country for why women should be recognised as leaders. And certainly in a post-COVID world, if we're looking at the health response and the impact that women's political leadership has had on health policy, for example, women should be leading that response. So these are all the sort of ideals that we're trying to work towards and building that case to work towards. And we know that, for example, strong links with organisations such as this, quotas when they're implemented correctly, women as role models, all impact the ability for a woman to be able to run and stand for election. There is this famous sort of statistic here in the UK that when you ask a man to run, it might take him about 2 days to make that decision. But when you ask a woman to run, it can take over a year. And really that's because women sort of really think deeply about their qualifications. They have to think deeply about what their family setup is. They have to think really deeply about their financing and what space they're going into, whether they're going to face online or physical abuse and violence as well. So the space isn't easy, but networks such as these and the caucus such as this has an important role to play in smoothing that pathway so that women can enter politics and sustain a career in politics. The last thing I'll say before I wrap up is that, of course, our research has some gaps, and we're very, very aware of that. So we do need to understand a lot better, for example, the impact of violence on women's political participation. But we also need to understand a lot better the impact of class and race, for example, on women's political leadership, and some of the dynamics around under-researched areas such as Middle East, North Africa, and perhaps Central Asia. And as I mentioned before, very much need to look at the role of political parties and some of the transformative approaches that we can bring to political parties as gatekeepers. I hope that was very useful for you and helps you in your own mobilization and your own sharing of those arguments as to why women need to be in the political space. And we've got the evidence for it, so it's there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sofia Fernandez. Please give a huge round of applause to all our speakers. They're so amazing in their timekeeping. All just either on the dot 20 minutes or closing into 20 minutes. So I would like to also greet several people. Ada beberapa orang sahabat kita, sahabat-sahabat KPPI yang rupanya juga bergabung melalui forum Zoom. Saya ingin menyapa ada Teh Eis, ada Mbak Titi, ini Mbak Titi Perludem ya, ada Mbak Yuda Irlang, ada Mbak Eva Masri Eva, Mbak Loli, ada Mbak Nur Syahbani Kaca Sungkana, Mbak Hetifah juga. Terima kasih banyak sudah bergabung. Kalau tidak sampai tersebut, mungkin luput dari pengamatan saya, kami tetap ucapkan terima kasih dan salam sayang untuk semua yang hadir. Sudah bergabung di forum ini juga untuk Anda, siapapun Anda, dari manapun Anda bergabung dalam Women Leaders Talk ini. Kami senang Anda bisa bergabung dan mengikuti forum ini, apalagi yang sudah sejak awal bersama kami. Kami juga harus mengucapkan terima kasih banyak kepada pihak-pihak yang sudah membuat kegiatan ini bisa terselenggara dengan baik, karena ini adalah kerjasama antara KPPI dengan dukungan dari Perludem, MPI, dan Westminster Foundation for Democracy. So I would like to also extend a huge thanks for the support of Perludem, the Association for Elections and Democracy, MPI, or the Indonesian Progressive Women, as well as Westminster Foundation for Democracy, for supporting KPPI in making this event successful today. And now let's proceed to the Q&A session. Langsung saja kita masuki sesi tanya jawab. Disediakan waktu berapa menit ini kira-kira untuk tanya jawab? Mungkin sekitar 20 menit. Baik. Di forum ini silakan ibu-ibu yang luar biasa sudah mengikuti tadi presentasi dari semua pembicara. Dimanfaatkan kesempatannya untuk mengajukan pertanyaan, boleh kecuali untuk Ibu Ade Yasin yang sudah tidak bersama kita karena tadi langsung harus melanjutkan kegiatan. Tapi keempat pembicara lain ini siap untuk menerima pertanyaan. So please feel free to put forward your question to our four incredible speakers from the Philippines, Bangladesh, Timor-Leste, and the United Kingdoms. Siapa yang akan mengajukan pertanyaan, silakan langsung. Bahasa Indonesia saja, nanti bisa ditranslate karena ada penerjemahnya. Mohon panitia dibantu mikrofonnya disiapkan. Yang mau bertanya silakan langsung berdiri. Silahkan, apakah ada yang mau mengajukan pertanyaan? Mungkin Kak Lena bisa memulai untuk memancing? Langsung ke Kak Lena dulu. We have our newly appointed Ambassador of Indonesia to Kuwait, Lena Mariana Mukti. She would like to put forward a question. Please state and put forward your question and who you address the question to.
Thank you, Sandrina. I would like to raise a question to all of the distinguished speakers. One of the speakers is my best friend, Elfina from Timor-Leste. Miss you so much. Usually we meet once in a year, but since pandemic, we haven't met for almost more than 1 year. Ona, that's Teddy Baguyat is my friend, and also Ted Filon. So I quite understand about the challenge in the Philippines that about the rights of women to speak up, especially in the areas of human rights and also in combating the discrimination in Philippines. And even though I learned a bit about the politics in Philippines, I see that all of the countries that represented by the speakers, the patriarchy system is still there. That's the women has full rights in order to get their, a better life. And as you, for this, all of the speakers understands that what we fight for in order to increase the representation, the women representation in the parliament is to influence the policy making process to give us the better life and a chance to, express our, or to actualize our potential. And as in Bangladesh, the progress is quite, you can say that it's a very positive, because as I said in the chat room, that I met a speaker, the first women speaker of Bangladesh, and then her performance is very impressive. And we now also have a speaker. So speaker is not spokesperson, but speaker is the, maybe the chief of the parliament. I mean, in Bahasa is Ketua DPR. So we, both as a Muslim country, Wasika, that we are facing a biggest challenge in order to, once you elected in the parliament, that you have to perform much better than men, and you cannot corrupt. I mean that if a man commit corruption, no, the news is not to dig up our personal life, etc., and it won't be a backfire to our fight or to our struggle in order to give a better life for women. But women committed corruption, so it will be a backfire for our struggle. And Sophia, that's thank you for holistic kind of analysis or presentation about the challenges that women facing globally. That I think that we share same problem, same challenges, and we would like to express our gratitude to WFD that have an initiative to support us here. Even though there are many kind of women movement like such as Women Democracy Network, Women Leadership Program, but I think that you have to look at specifically in the country that you have a program, that you have to also specific initiative, especially in Indonesia. We here enjoy the rights to represent or to nominate women in the party list, but we haven't enjoyed like a reserved seat like in Pakistan, for example. So we now we fight for, or we work hard to ensure that the Election Commission decree will be implemented for 2024, since the law of election won't be amended for this period. So I think that we are very optimistic by working together with all women movement, women nationally or globally, that will achieve what we fight for. I think that I would like to express our gratitude to Ibu Septi as chairperson, as the chairperson of the caucus, and also Ibu Dia Pitaloka, also as a chairperson of the Presidium KPPI. We hope that in the future, we have to cooperate more closely, and also by support of WFD. Thank you, Mbak Sandrina Malacchiano.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you so much. So after Madam Lena has greeted you in person one by one, perhaps another question before I present it to the speakers to comment on the questions put forward here from the floor. Please diperkenalkan diri, kemudian pertanyaannya untuk siapa, Mbak? Silakan berdiri, Mbak.
Ya, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Selamat sore. Nama saya Marlita Puasa, perwakilan dari DPD KPPI Maluku Utara. Mungkin saya tidak bertanya, tapi hanya tertarik dengan apa yang disampaikan oleh Bu Sofia tadi yang dari United Kingdom. mungkin ada presentasi yang beliau sampaikan itu sesuai dengan apa yang terjadi, pengalaman yang kami alami juga di daerah ya. Seperti yang tergantung partai misalnya, bagaimana harus lebih diperhatikan peran-peran partai untuk bisa memperhatikan perempuan, ya, untuk mengukur atau perempuan potensial juga. Partai kadang rekrutmen partai juga itu salah satu prioritas. Ya, saya mungkin akan sampaikan bahwa perempuan jarang sekali ya ada perempuan yang mau masuk di dunia binar ini gitu. Artinya dia lebih yang akademisi ya, bicaranya yang akademisi itu dia nggak suka ya mungkin masuk bergabung di partai politik. Jadi banyak partai kewalahan juga untuk merekrut perempuan yang punya potensi, yang mungkin kalau dilihat dari soal apa namanya syarat dari pendidikan misalnya, sehingga bisa mengukur kualitas dari perempuan yang sudah harus siap duduk di parlemen seperti itu. Jadi bukan karena perempuan juga selain dia merasa minder, kaku masuk dalam partai politik, jadi itu yang kita hadapi banyak yang terjadi di daerah-daerah, misalnya perempuan yang lulusan SMA tidak tahu mau kerja apa, dia langsung bergabung, partai langsung merekrut dan dia masuk ke partai politik tanpa ada bekal, ya. Jarang juga partai melakukan pendidikan politik seperti itu misalnya. Terus kemudian dia langsung bertarung dihadapkan, karena rekrut mereka itu pada saat momen ya, rekrutmen partai. Pada saat mengisi pemenuhan keterwakilan 30% dalam syarat pencalonan. Ya, seperti itu. Ya, jadi saya tertarik apa yang disampaikan Bu Sofia tadi, bahwa partai lebih memiliki peran yang harus lebih diprioritaskan terkait dengan bagaimana merekrut perempuan-perempuan yang bisa duduk di parlemen. Makasih, demikian saya kembalikan.
Terima kasih, mohon maaf tadi namanya siapa Ibu?
Marlita Puasa.
Marlita, Bu Marlita. Apakah pertanyaan ini langsung diterjemahkan tadi ke pembicara atau tidak? Sudah ya, jadi pembicara sudah mendengar dalam bahasa Inggris. Baik. Okay, so the question put forward by our participant, Ibu Marlita from North Maluku, has been translated to English, so I'm sure all the speakers have understood the question. And there's also a question here in the chat box. If I may put forward a question to all speakers about ways, the most effective ways used so far to win elections in terms of competing with men. Hilang tulisannya. In terms of competing with men or male competitors during atau minimal yang or at least also with the competition amongst women themselves. So that's the question in the chat box. Sekaligus saya juga ingin mengingatkan kepada peserta online untuk tolong mengisi formulir registrasi yang ada di chat box. So let us go to our speakers now. We still have 4 speakers here. Maybe I could ask Sophia first from WFD to comment on the question. Like from North Maluku, Ibu Marlita said that she agreed with what you said about the role played by political parties, because sharing from her experience there, there is a lack of capacity building or political education for women. And it's hard to recruit women because they tend to not be interested in joining political parties or just entering the political world. And also the question put forward in the chat box in terms of how to win elections, how to compete with male competitors, and also to face competition amongst women. Sophia, are you still with us? Maybe you could comment on those 2 questions, and also maybe comment on what Ibu Lena also put forward earlier in the beginning of the Q&A session, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for those questions. I mean, this is one of the big conundrums: is how do you bring political parties with you? I've seen lots of ways that political parties are encouraged to nominate more women, but also create space for women. A quota is definitely one of those ways that it does disrupt narratives about where women can and can't be. So it does provide a space for women to enter politics, but quotas do need to be applied correctly. So in some countries, you've got a quota for only one term of parliament. So women enter a reserved seat, for example, only for one term, but then they have to compete openly in the second term, and then they don't tend to be re-elected. Or in some countries, women, for example, in Nepal, might come in on a reserved seat, but they don't have access to constituency development funds that all other MPs would have. And so then that way, they're already unable to perform some of those functions of being an MP and don't really build a profile. And we certainly do some work in that space to try to navigate that. But one thing I would say about this idea of qualifications, that there was a book that came out last year from a researcher, former colleague in the academic space. It had a very controversial title. The book's title was "Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders?" And the premise of the book really was about our conceptualization of leadership in all of our countries, whether it's in South America, whether it's in Asia, Europe, elsewhere, and the way that we equate certain leadership qualities with men over women. And so this is a fundamental question about how do we transform some of these narratives about who are leaders and how is leadership exercised. And really it's a long-term work, it's work for you, for me, it's work through our programs that we fund to really change that question. And when you have women who are role models, so when you do have women in leadership position and they do have profile, those conversations do shift. And so we've done some research in some countries that looks at, this goes to the other question about women competing against women perhaps. We have done research that shows that women will vote for women who have a significant profile. So it might be a particularly famous leader, for example. But women generally, even despite that, women generally won't recognize women as leaders and will tend to vote for men. And so there's real considerations to be given here about public education campaigns, about raising your profile as a candidate, but also caucuses like this, supporting different narratives about what women bring to the leadership and political leadership. And definitely political parties need to prioritise women. In some countries, you have also quotas for parties themselves. So parties themselves will implement a quota so that the party will nominate a certain amount of women. For example, in the UK, there's some parties who will run what's called all women shortlists. So they will only nominate women to run for a particular seat so that there's no men nominated to run for that seat. It allows women to be able to go for competitively for seats that are winnable, for example. So there's a whole host of ways that political parties can really hold that responsibility amongst themselves to give women that space. Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador, for your comments as well. Absolutely, as I said, quotas are certainly, and when they're implemented, that's the next part, is making sure that they're implemented, really does transform the political space. With quotas also needs to come, for example, some of those professional development opportunities for women candidates so that they can access, training on how to be a candidate, how to run, the fundraising that needs to come behind each women candidate as well, giving them opportunities to learn how to fundraise in their communities, but also access some of that funding that men tend to access because they've got those networks with businesses, with private sector, whatever it may be, and caucuses like this can facilitate that for them, because we know that financing is a huge barrier for women as well. So there's a lot of space there, I think, for the caucus to support that quota, not just by implementing legislation, but bringing some really sort of practical programming back up to what that implementation practically looks like.
Okay, thank you so much. Before we go to the other speakers, we have two participants via Zoom who have raised their hands who would like to put forward a question. Ibu Aida Hubaida dan Ibu Ula Nurhwati. Yes, ada Kak Ula dan ada Kak Aida Hubaida. Silahkan kalau mau mengajukan pertanyaan kepada speakers. Silahkan mungkin bisa di-unmute dan langsung saja Kak Ula atau Kak Aida untuk mengajukan pertanyaan. Apakah masih bersama kami?
Terima kasih.
Ini sepertinya Kak Ula ya?
Ya, masih Sandrina.
Silakan Kak.
Sandrina, Kak Ula. Ya, singkat saja. First of all, saya terima kasih kepada seluruh pembicara, speakers yang berasal dari luar Indonesia, dan lebih khusus lagi kepada seluruh peserta Rakernas dan juga moderator. Saya tahun 2017 kita menghadiri Women in Politics.
Tampaknya koneksi Kak Ula kurang baik ya. Jadi terganggu. Kak Ula suaranya hilang. I'm sorry. I think our participant lost connection. Mungkin bisa ke Kak Aida dulu.
Oh ya. Halo.
Ya, silakan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Selamat sore buat semuanya. Yang saya hormati seluruh peserta Rakernas KPPI yang saya cintai dan saya banggakan. Saya Aida Hubaida dari Ketua KPPI Kabupaten Tangerang, Banten. Ya, salam sehat buat semuanya. Alhamdulillah pada masa pandemi ini kita tetap melaksanakan Rakernas KPPI. Jadi walaupun kondisinya masih masa pandemi, saya turut berbangga pada Rakernas ini bisa berpartisipasi. Langsung saja Mbak Sandrina Malacchiano sebagai moderator yang saya hormati, saya pada kesempatan ini ingin mencoba mengajukan pertanyaan. Saya dari Tangerang, Banten, ada di 29 kecamatan yang notabene banyak masih daerah-daerah yang tertinggal. Masih banyak perempuan-perempuan yang belum begitu bersemangat untuk mengikuti kancah perpolitikan. Saya sebagai Ketua DPC KPPI Kabupaten Tangerang mohon solusinya dari para panelis, apa kira-kira untuk memberikan semangat, memotivasi para kaum perempuan di daerah Kabupaten Tangerang yang notabene kuota 30% kuota perempuan untuk melengkapi di parlemen tahun 2024.
Baik.
Mungkin itu saja Mbak Sandrina.
Baik.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Kak Aida.
Salam
Sehat terus.
semuanya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Pertanyaan ini juga sudah diterjemahkan? Mbak Sekar? Pertanyaan ini sudah diterjemahkan kepada panelis. Oke. As I'm informed that the question put forward by Mrs. Aida from Tangerang has also been translated. So I'm assuming that all the speakers have heard and understood the question. I would like to go to Wasika Ayesha Khan, maybe because perhaps in Bangladesh the situation is also quite similar. the challenges faced there. Correct me if I'm mistaken. The challenges of women not being motivated enough to enter the political world. So what should be done? Do you have any suggestions or inputs or tips to motivate women to be more interested in joining a political party or entering the political world?
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for the very pertinent questions, and thank you to Madam Ambassador for her insights. It is, I believe, that affirmative actions are like quotas are required till we have a level playing field, and main hindrances of women coming into politics are, of course, we have heard that it's financial. Then also there is toxic masculinity, which is everywhere, and how one perceives a woman leader. Same characteristics in a male would be termed as leadership qualities, and when it's a female, she would be termed as aggressive. So perceptions are very important, and women who are already in the political arena or in positions of influence, it is important to mentor younger women, which is happening in Bangladesh, and it is important to motivate women to participate in formulating policies which affect their future. And we have seen the wonderful effect the elected members in the local governments have had in the, in motivating, inspiring other women to come into politics, to take up leadership roles. And I'm talking about rural women here and urban women. They have the platform to run in the local elections. They have the platform to raise their voices. They have the platform to take part in policy formulation. And this goes on till women are also in parliament. The political parties having women in their committees, it is challenging to implement that. We are still facing challenges, but that also makes a difference. And this state's, full support for women's education and containing gender-based violences, having proper laws in place for women who are bullied online, that helps, because as a country of majority Muslims, Bangladesh has to face religious fanaticism as well. And that hampers women from coming forward. There are issues within the families and there are issues within the community. But having said that, Bangladesh has come a long way. We have women working from home, online. We have women working outside their houses, and we have women working in the political arena. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much. Ona Caritos, would you like to add? to what was just explained by Wasika Shakan? Ona Caritas, are you still with us? I can't hear you. Wait.
Yes, yeah. Now I
Okay.
can unmute myself. Yes, thank you. First, I would like to say thank you to the Honorable Ambassador. Representative Bagilat is already a private citizen, and Ted Filon is still a journalist in the country. So thank you, Ambassador, for your kind words. And just to answer the question of our last participant, in the Philippines, what we do, what the Election Commission does, the election management body, is to provide training specifically for women to encourage them to run, teaching them how to how to fill out the certificates of candidacy, teaching them the different election laws. So it's a very targeted campaign of our election management body to encourage more women to run in office. Another policy that was just recently adopted by our election commission is to give more points to political parties which have more women candidates. So, for example, there's a majority dominant party in our election, in our electoral legal framework, and there's a minority dominant party. So, if your party has more women candidates, then you get more points than you get, and then there's a higher probability that you will be the one declared by our election management body to be the dominant majority party. So those are just two ways that our election management body encourages women to exercise or to run for public office. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Elfina, Sosa, Caravalo, I'd like to have your comments in addition to what our previous speakers have explained in regards to the same question.
Thank you very much. I think I would like to answer to the question, the last question about women's participation in political in the rural area or in daerah. I can say that from all the achievements I explained earlier, there is still a huge challenge or a huge gap that we, the Timorese women, are encountered, such as a huge gap of women's political participation in local life is low, but women's participation in the national level is very high. So, in order to bridge the gap, it is the role of political parties, especially the women's wing organization, to encourage the local women who are in the rural areas, and to make them realize that there is a platform that support them, that they have the same right as the men. They will have to show their capacity, and they will have to have the courage to run. So, like in East Timor now, because the gap is still very wide, so the civil society and the political party, women's wings organization is working very hard to encourage women to participate in the local elections. So I think it's back to the political party or the women's wing organization to encourage them. Sometimes I can say that women have the capacity, but sometimes they are less encouraged because some of the women are not aware about their potential until somebody step forward and say, look, you have this capacity, look, you can do it. So I can say that it is all depend on the political party. We all know that political parties, most of political parties are male dominated, and as one of the speaker mentioned that they hold the key to the realm of politics, and it is true. So for women out there, make yourself visible, make yourself show your potential, and eventually you will be chosen. But before I end my answer, I'd like to congratulate Ibu Duta Besar Honorable Lena Mariana Mukti. So I wish her all the best on her new post, and I hope I believe that she will be a good ambassador. Thank you.
I agree. Congratulations to Kalena, our newly appointed ambassador for Kuwait. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Caravalo. And now to conclude our forum, I would like to have a closing statement about 1 minute, 1 minute each from each speaker. To begin with, let's go to Sofia Fernandez. Just a closing statement briefly from you to end this session.
Thank you very much. I mean, the last thing I want to say is that, you know, it's not a coincidence that COVID-19 has impacted women around the world. You know, over 80% of health workers globally are women. We've seen women leave the workforce. We've seen them have to retract to home. So what does this mean for women's participation in public life? Well, it's just made it even the more harder. So it is really important to have spaces like this and to have, you know, dedicated efforts to keep encouraging women to stand. And we've talked about this. How do we bring women into this space? Well, we all have a responsibility to ask her to stand, and then we have a further responsibility to help her get there, and that's programs that give her professional skills, that's working to motivate governments and parliaments to pass legislation that are women friendly and women forward in our affirmative action. And that's definitely to work with political parties, if you have that access and that space, to change the dynamics within political parties to prioritize women, because we know that the world and society changes when women are enacting their political leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Wasika Aisha Khan.
Thank you. It's imperative that we pull our resources together, work hand in hand, and use our influence and networking to bring in more women leaders so that we can have a better tomorrow and a better world. Thank you.
Thank you. Elfina Sosa Caravalo from Timor-Leste, your closing statement.
Okay, thank you very much. I would close with saying that democracy will be stronger if women take part and take their role and take their position. And democracy is stronger when it includes women and when it is inclusive. So I wish KPPI good luck. Semoga rapat kerja nasionalnya berjalan lancar, and wish you all good luck. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih banyak, dan terakhir kita ke Ona Caritos from the Philippines. Your closing statement.
Hi again, good afternoon to all of us, and I'm just reminded by a song of my favorite artist, Beyonce, and when she asks, who runs the world? Women. So I think we should just continue with these discussions until we reach the 30% minimum standard of women representation in our legislatures and in our congresses. And that has been a goal of us of ours since 1990s, since the Beijing Declaration. So let us all channel Beyonce and answer her question of who runs the world? Women. So that's all, and thank you very much to the organizers of this event.
Ya, terima kasih banyak. Saya mohon kepada seluruh yang hadir tepuk tangan untuk pembicara-pembicara kita, our respectable, honorable speakers. Thank you so much. Ona Caritos from the Philippines, Wasika Aisha Khan from Bangladesh, Elfina Sosa Caravalo from Timor-Leste, and Sofia Fernandez from the United Kingdom. Amazing forum, such a rich collection of amazing women speakers has dedicated their time and shared with us their insights in this Women Leaders Talk. We wish you all the best. Stay healthy, stay safe. Regards, best wishes from Jakarta, Indonesia. Dan terima kasih juga kepada Ibu Ade Yasin, sekalipun tidak bersama kita saat ini, tapi sudah berkenan tadi di awal acara untuk juga berbagi. Terima kasih banyak kepada semua yang sudah mengikuti forum ini online via Zoom, mudah-mudahan bermanfaat. Untuk KPPI, Ibu Septi, sukses untuk Rakernas kedua yang masih akan berlangsung sampai dengan besok ya, dilancarkan semua forumnya dan memberikan hasil yang terbaik kontribusi untuk demokrasi di Indonesia. Juga untuk peran perempuan yang makin hebat, makin bagus, makin nyata di panggung politik Indonesia. Tercapai kuota 30% itu. Terima kasih untuk semua yang sudah hadir di forum ini. Saya akhiri karena memang sudah lewat waktu dari yang tadinya ditargetkan jam 4. Kita tutup forum ini dengan saya memberikan doa terbaik bukan hanya untuk KPPI tapi untuk semua yang hadir, semua yang mengikuti forum ini juga online. Mudah-mudahan hidup ke depan untuk negara ini, untuk keluarga, untuk masing-masing orang juga akan terus menjadi lebih baik, lebih kuat, terutama di era pandemi seperti ini. Semuanya senantiasa sehat, dihindarkan dari COVID-19 untuk seterusnya, dan mudah-mudahan kita bisa bertemu lagi di forum yang berbeda untuk terus berbagi dan memberikan kontribusi nyata untuk Indonesia. Saya Sandrina Malacchiano menutup kebersamaan kita dengan memohon maaf untuk segala ketidaksempurnaan. Terima kasih untuk perhatian Anda. Billahi taufik wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih, selamat sore.
Terima kasih Mbak Sandrina atas kesediaan memoderatori acara luar biasa pada siang hingga sore hari ini. Mudah-mudahan ke depan kita bisa rutin ya mengadakan acara